Welcome back to We Three Queens. I'm Chirabo, and I'll have my guests introduce themselves. We'll start with the lady on my left.
I'm Musonda.
I'm Micheline.
And I'm Aching.
So this episode is a bit different. You must be wondering, who are they? Or
You're
on my show.
Okay, sorry.
In all seriousness, my name is Chirabo, and I am hijacking this episode today.
Hello.
Go for it.
A few of you may recognize me from this time last year. We did an
God.
episode.
It's been about a year.
Yes, we did.
Oh, wow.
We did a really fun episode, and I'm so glad the Queens asked me back.
Yes.
And it's going to be really fun because I'm sure there's a lot that's happened in the last year.
A year. All in a year.
More than a
Time
year.
flies.
Okay.
And a lot can happen in a year.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So speaking of, I'd like to tell you what we'll be talking about today.
Okay.
So today we are talking about transitional periods. And these transitional periods, we can understand them as that time between what we used to do and what our next opportunity is, you know, from when you've closed one chapter and you're opening another. And this can be quite the stressful time. I'm sure everyone has gone through a period like that, and we learn so much, but we don't often get to talk about them, and they can be very taxing mentally, internally, as it's a very internal and individual path. And yeah, so we just like to just open those doors, as it shouldn't be an awkward thing. Like, we're not always at the apex, we're not always at the top of our mountains.
Correct.
And yeah, we need to talk about those valleys.
Yes.
We're told like life is a series of like valleys and tops.
Yes.
And I'm just coming out of mine, and I mean, when I was being so optimistic about it, I actually wasn't in a valley. I was like, this must be the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
This is the season of L's.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn, as we've said.
Right.
And so I'd like to delve into it, as we would love to know what the ladies can tell us about their seasons in the valleys and the realities of them, as well as, you know, those golden nuggets. Those golden nuggets keep us going. So I'd love to start with, I think I'd actually start first and just see what you'll think.
Okay.
The first thing that I learned on my journey
Yeah.
is the power of optimism and having to be a self-starter with your optimism.
Yes.
Okay.
Because as I said, it was a bit of a journey.
Yeah.
And you'll find that a lot of the days, day in, day out, you have to be the one to push yourself to know that this isn't going to last forever. It takes as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just need to be more idealistic about this than being a realist. Actually, leave realism alone. It's not for you if you're in the valley.
Yeah.
I think you need to always, I found that you needed to push yourself to know that everything I'm doing is going to.
I love it. Be your own cheerleader, and like, you know, people. Not everyone's going to do it for
But
you.
how hard is it? How hard is it to be your own cheerleader? What can you tell us about that?
Super hard. I just have to think through so many examples. But I love, first of all, it's so good to have you back and have you please oscillate between asking us and telling us, because I know this is fresh, top of mind, recent for you.
Right.
Gosh, you know what? It's so hard to remember the valleys sometimes. I don't know. It's almost like, okay, well, let me just say that I'm going to go way back in time, but there could be one more recently. When I'd been working already a good chunk of time, something like, 8 years, and I chose to take myself out of work and do an MBA, paid for a very expensive MBA with a combination of savings, scholarship, and loan. It was so expensive that those savings, just wipes them out. Got out, a great one, great brand, and got out, and it took me a while, much longer than I had anticipated, to get a job. And of course I had already burnt a hole in my pocket, right? So I'm like, I don't have money. I had not had money in a while, right? The student period, fine, we're all kind of poor and we were in school, we didn't need a lot of money. But the 8 years prior to that, I had really good jobs, and now I'm back in the market. I'm in the UK. I'm like, okay, do I go back to Joburg where I was prior? Where's this next big job? The MBA is supposed to really lift me.
Exactly.
And I'm telling you, I'm just thinking, I don't know that I was the biggest cheerleader for myself. There were a couple of things. One is people will just be like, come on, Mish, you'll find a job. Just thinking about it objectively, thinking about the fact that I already had degrees and experience. So I did have other people, especially my family. So look, I know not everybody has the right sort of positive-minded family and friends, but I would say now in hindsight, it's nice to surround yourself with the more positive people and lose the naysayers, lose the ones who want to see you in misery. You know, and if you can't lose them forever, lose them in the moment. Because I remember there were a few people that were like, I don't know, I just felt like they didn't want the best for me. You know? So that's one thing in hindsight. And then I also think that, you know, what I did badly was when people said, so what are you doing now? You know, expecting something really big for me. You know? So what are you doing now that's
it's like MBA plus.
You know? And I was doing, I was consulting actually, but it was somebody who told me how to say it. It's consulting. So this woman had a startup, and it was really actually really cool if I think about it. It's it's e-fragrance. So it was like this, you know, maybe bands like an Apple Watch that emit a scent.
Oh wow.
You know, that she was pioneering, she was product developing, and I was doing work with her, and somebody who's a senior consultant said to me, but you're actually busy, you know? So just say you're consulting, it isn't a lie. And what was really cool about that is later, you know, the lady was able to pay me a little bit. So that was one hack. And I'll just stop there because I probably think of something a bit more practical in terms of lessons learned. But this thing of being your cheerleader, if you can't,
Being your own
say,
cheerleader.
have those cheerleaders around
That's
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
You know, as you were talking, one of the things that struck me, I'm so much that optimism thing, but it's not conscious. It's really about being positive. I wouldn't say that I'm optimistic, but I try to focus on the positive.
Nice.
Because to your point, if not you, then who?
If not you, then who?
But
Exactly.
beyond that, one of the techniques I use is I plan. I get very strategic. I'm generally very strategic, but I'm strategic about myself and what I need to do to move myself out of that valley, out of the Grand Canyon. And so I start to think, okay, you know, first of all, what is my first priority? I need to get some cash. So how do I do that? I probably need to take on a couple of interesting, you know, a couple of gigs. So maybe it's a training. So who are the 3, 4, 6 people I can talk to? Who else could probably have some work on strategy? Okay, so and so, and actually I've done some work with so and so. Let me give them a call and just kind of remind them, hey, you know, get back to being top of mind. So the immediate thing is, if the immediate need is you need some cash, then how do you make sure you get that cash? How do you get that database and get on that? If you're looking for something more permanent, that's the opportunity to also clean up. I mean, I've gotten 4 international jobs just through LinkedIn. So making sure that my LinkedIn is constantly updated and where I am completely blowing my trumpet unashamedly. Because if you don't blow your trumpet, ain't nobody gonna do it for you. So you blow it as loud as you can. So those for me would be kind of the 2 things that I've kind of done to sort of move myself out of that, you know, that dip.
So here's the thing, you know, and I was reflecting about this as I was speaking, because I was like, you know, this isn't going to relate to everyone. I had already 8 years and a degree. You are talking about perhaps already 10 plus years experience and a degree or 2. You know, and I'm just thinking, that's you in the valley after a decade or so of experience, degrees. Even my example, guys, deep down, you know, 8 years in, 2 degrees in, I knew, right, that I would get something because the CV. In fact, it reminds me, my CV was already a page and a half. Reminds me of when Chirabo came, you know, a year or so ago, and she talks about her CV being a paragraph. So my question, whether to Chirabo, Mus, I know you've got things to say. When you're starting out 20-something, the CV is a paragraph, and you've never worked and had a gap, so that your memory cells remind you that you will get that job. You're just starting out. You're thinking, am I ever? So, any tips and trouble? We're gonna need to go back to you.
I want to go back a little bit to the valley, but before I go to the valley, I need to talk about the 1 paragraph CV. I was very blessed on many accounts. I finished my university at University of Zambia. I graduated in conservation biology and education. I was supposed to be a teacher. But one of my mentors and my former professor basically recommended me to go and volunteer at a chimpanzee sanctuary.
Right.
So I went and volunteered for a month, and I stayed there and fed chimpanzees, and by the river. And
does that sound good?
and then I came back.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if I would have. I may have stayed in the valley if you bring me chimpanzee. I'm terrified of them.
Oh my God.
And it was fascinating. It was
Yeah.
fascinating because it's this place in Zambia called Chimfunshi.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, seriously, Dr. Chabwala, you've recommended me to go and volunteer at this chimpanzee sanctuary? When I got there, I realized the Kafua River, which is this river system that, is a tributary to the Zambezi, is where, the chimpanzees basically, that was the borderline, and food systems and fish and all of that. And we're walking them around. And I'm like, oh my God, this is about nature. This is about environment. This is about spaces. And then I joined the government later on as a biologist on a river. The same river.
No way.
Looking at invasive species. Mind you, I'm 24.
Yep.
And by the time I turned 25, my colleague, who's a Canadian guy, Francois, if you ever watch this, lovely guy, he was like, you know what, there's this internship in Switzerland at the conventional wetlands. I was like, what? Internship? I've never lived away from Zambia.
Yeah.
Why should I go? And he's like, I'm going to help you write and sell yourself. And for me, about being in the valleys, who's around you there to inspire you and to help you prepare? Listen, I was 25 with a 1.5 pages, and really it was, what were you doing on the river? Oh yeah, I was just on the boat, and I was, counting the invasive species and the water hyacinth. And it's like, no, reframe.
Yes.
You did the samples, chemical sample composition. You talked to soda. So when I began to itemize, and I was like, oh, I never thought about it that way.
That's so powerful.
What did you do in Chimfunshi? Oh, so you're not just feeding the chimpanzees, you're monitoring the animal behavior dynamic. What happens to animals that are brought out of captivity? Because these are chimpanzees that were taken from airports. They've been staffed in a tennis ball thing as a baby. Mother has been shot at. So I realized that the people who help you in these spaces that help you navigate the complexity and join the dots.
I love it.
Yes.
There are two things there.
Join the dots.
There's joining the dots, and there's getting people to help you join the dots in a way that's relevant and kind of sector/topic specific.
Correct.
The lingo that you use, where you can get inspo from LinkedIn, by the way, if you have no friends.
Yeah.
Where you can also talk to people. That's what I picked. But the second thing, it's really quite hard because remember, you're in the valley. So I don't know how valleys look like for you all, but sometimes valleys for me look like I'm just chilling by myself. I'm not.
You just.
I don't need to tell anyone my business is not
But the thing is,
talking to people. Do you talk to people? What happens?
well, yes, we're gonna especially circle back to that because
Okay.
we're gonna circle back to that. The power of conversation is a very powerful tool. But the thing is, like, what you've also just said is something so important. Where you say, like, I may not be doing something specifically now, or something that's official that I can just tell people I'm a manager of this, or I do this, or I'm in this field, and you say, like, I'd rather just say I'm chilling and sitting back. I think that actually roots from it having like a kind of a negative connotation on not having something
Like
that
being
you can
lazy.
present.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the thing
that's
is-
society. That's those are the norms, right?
Because actually,
Yeah.
okay. Actually, small anecdote for you.
Oh, go for it.
So how I learned the power of honesty
Yeah.
in the valley is something that is so. I remember a year ago to the date. Yes, I was here. I was on this show. It was very interesting. I was freelancing at the time.
Yep.
And I was writing market copy and a little here and there. And the thing is, people. At first, like I had this idea that people are only looking for moving ducks, not sitting ducks. So if you ask me, if you ask me like, oh, what are you doing? I was not going to tell you that I'm actually looking for contracted work. I'm actually looking to be settled now. I'm not, in that sense, I'm not employed.
Yeah.
I would not have said that. So now I would say my if I was to put a time limit on how long this certain valley lasted, it was just off of writing my last paper for my master's and just before taking on my thesis. So I knew I had time.
Yeah.
So now at least I had that fallback answer, which is interesting because not a lot of people do, but I would also just say, oh yeah, just my master's. Just But now, as I looked for these jobs, right, as those months went, and as you say, like, oh, LinkedIn, blow your trumpet, be a cheerleader, and if I was to actually name that period in my life, we're gonna circle back to that, because the last time I was here, I said, if your life was a book, what would this specific chapter be called? In that season, I would have called myself the unwilling optimist, because I was unwilling to. In fact, I am a natural optimist, but I'm like, now I have to be, I have to cheerlead, I have to be, and so I was answering it in that way. So now imagine, early on in that first month, in the first month of the Valley, guys, the first month, I ran into an old colleague who supervised me in my first job. And I remember he asked me, what are you up to now? And I gave all the crisscrossy answers. So now imagine, this is 9 months later, and I had just gone back home from here, from Nairobi. I ran into him because he was now leaving for this great job that he got in Europe. I know I'll send you the link, shout out to you, you know yourself. And I was like, this is great for you. Like, I was finally allowed to link up because I knew he was leaving. And like, I was dodging a lot of social situations because at that point I was tired of dancing around it when I just wanted my door to appear. I want my opportunity. I want my thing. Yeah. Now imagine, as soon as I just said, oh yeah, I am looking for something, and I'd crashed his leaving party. He said, you are? I mean, I've worked with you before, you're great, you're amazing. Like, I actually have a friend who's starting something really great. He tapped his friend in the middle of this party and said, take her email, you need to know who this is for what you're taking on. He took my email, and I was like, this is gonna be the millionth email I've given out. And imagine that, I think I had my interview within 7 days of that and had my job by the end of it.
That's
my own honesty had blocked it all those months. Sometimes your door is there. It doesn't matter how you find your door, but I found in the Valley, the most important thing I found is we need to actually debunk that tough thing to actually say that I'm looking right now.
Yeah, there's
that's so powerful.
Wrong with that. I think that is so powerful.
Yeah, we say, oh, I'm in between, or I'm doing so that.
Yeah, but you know what's unique about that situation is that it was somebody you felt safe enough with
to share,
to be vulnerable with, and say, I'm actually looking for something. And I think society, because society can be so judgmental when you're not actually doing something. It's difficult with somebody you're not close to because you will be judged, and that makes you feel worse about yourself.
And you don't want to talk about it.
And so that's how it's called self-preservation. You're protecting and shielding yourself. And so I love that I love your example and that you found the courage to do that. How do we do that in a circumstance where you don't necessarily know people? And I think it's how you package or present. I'd love to hear your thoughts as a young person.
No, I want to actually tell you guys, this is so interesting. Yeah. Because I know, first of all, it's so inspiring because one day I'm going to be like, what was my Valley again? Like, I love how she went, what was my Valley? So that's that in itself is great, but even for young people, it was a thing I saw on Twitter the other day where we spoke about LinkedIn and putting yourself out there. Right now you're able to put a thing on your profile that says open to work, right? It puts and there was someone who tweeted, it went viral, they said there's something that feels so beggy about switching that thing on and I just don't know if I want to. Even just that, it's about how will they know? How will I know that you're, and especially when you're not working with the lengths on your CV, how will they know? But something you put in, she said, that I'd love to know about your yeses. Yeah, we're going to talk about the power of a yes. Okay. So now, have you heard this saying, energy is never destroyed, it's just redirected?
Correct.
Yes. So you can find that, yes, you're in school, or you've been doing this job, and when that chapter ends, you'll find that when it's not being redirected, when you don't have avenues, you're channeling it in, I think because it's staying in that vacuum of yourself, you'll find out a lot is happening internally. Anxiety, worry, whatnot.
True. Absolutely.
And like, the fact is, like, it's also the way we see that when we're like looking at the situation from the other way, like as you said, rephrasing, rechanneling, when you're like, I have nothing, I'm doing now.
Right.
Or you have all the time in the world now.